It's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, this is Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. As I continue to bring people to her success story, I continually feel how lucky I am to meet so many amazing women and those few exceptional men who come and chat with us. Today, I don't know, Lesley and I were connected, I truly think, through the women ancestry vibe. You know, Lesley Michaels was born to feminism. Her foundational ethos was shaped by her audacious paternal grandmother. Okay. And I had a maternal grandmother and great grandmother. That was a huge impact. A first wave feminist and savvy businesswoman at age 12, no less. You ready for this, ladies and gentlemen? Age 12, she dreamed one night of creating a platform for bringing women together in alliance. The following morning, making notes about her dream started her on her path that would inform Lesley's entire life. As you don't need to listen to me read about Lesley, we want to talk with Lesley. Lesley is also the author of her most recent book, On the Shoulders of Mighty Women. So Lesley, welcome, and let's talk about being influenced by some mighty women, you included.
Thank you, Ivy. Thank you for having me, and let's do it.
So at 12 years old, you clearly had a vision. And that's rare.
Oh, okay. It just kind of happens.
You know, and I will tell you, my vision at 12 was to dance. My vision at 16 was to dance. My vision at 20 was to dance. My vision at 23 maybe started shifting. Be that as it may, what, you talk about on the foundation of mighty women. Where did this concept come from, and share a little bit about your background here, how this really went from 12 to a lifelong path?
Well, as you mentioned, I had this amazing paternal grandmother who managed to own her own home and her own business in her own name in the early 1940s, in spite of laws in every state across the nation forbidding female ownership of physical assets. Now,
wow. I'm going to stop you there because that is just a wow and almost unheard of at that time.
Yes, it was. And while I thought she was amazing and she was my grandmother, and she always had these seeds of wisdom that when she would give them to me, when she would speak them, there was something inside of me that knew I didn't have a clue what she was talking about, but that I wasn't going to forget that. I'd figure it out later. And so I did. And so that marked me from birth. When I was 12 and literally had that dream in the middle of the night and woke up the next day and was writing it all down, Ivy, I cannot tell you how many times I wish I had that naive little 12-year-old girl's notes. I can't imagine, but I had a dream. And it continued to stay with me. When I was 16, we were pushing for the Equal Rights Amendment. And I was a young hippie kid. I'm at the very young end of the boomer generation. So I did what hippie kids do. I stuck out my thumb and hitchhiked to New York City so that I could be in the center of all these women to learn. Something early in my life instilled this continual quest to learn and to learn from women. Well, eventually I had to buy groceries. So I moved back to Middle America and ran up the ranks of corporate oil. And that's when I met the next four women who were profoundly influential in my life. They were each 15 to 17 years older than me. And one at a time, they came along and just literally plucked me up and said, come on, I'm going to teach you something. And they impacted me in terms of business. They impacted me in terms of feminism. They impacted me in terms of politics. They impacted me in terms of teaching me by modeling what grace is. And so the title On the Shoulders of Mighty Women is a tribute to my grandmother and these four amazing women and all the women in New York.
So if we looked at a couple of things that you learned in this journey, right, and how you apply it today, because there's so often, we learned so much, and I will just, surrender. Life is busy, ladies and gentlemen. Life is busy, and we're learning nuggets, and then we're rushing forward, and we don't always notice what we're learning or taking in, or acknowledge and pay tribute to, like you did. So if we look at a couple of things that you've learned and how you have taken it forward in your life, what would they be?
A generosity of spirit.
I like that. I like that very, very much. A generosity of spirit. How do you take that forward? How have you taken that forward to represent your world today?
I have found myself being the go-to, as it were, for women around the country. Just yesterday, a woman I've known for a very long time called and said, if I email you something, can you look at it and tell me what's wrong with it? And it was an initial, initial announcement of a big project that she's getting ready to launch. And I hear that a lot, and it's in all different kinds of areas. And I've been told many, many times, I know I can always call you because you are a safe place. And women have found that. A lot of women have found that. And I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of being able to create a safe space where when a woman or anyone, it just happens to almost always be women, almost always, when they find themselves in a place where they know it's time to step and they don't know where to step, they don't hesitate to reach out. And they know if I don't have an answer, I'll tell them. And if I have a suggestion, I'll offer it.
So it's interesting, that back in the early days of women in business, and let's jump back 20, 30, 40 years ago. Okay, because these are the eras we're talking about, over 20 years.
Yep.
That women found other women competitive. Okay, there was a feeling of, well, there could only be one woman at this boardroom table if they are even going to allow one. So I can't let any other women in, and I need to keep them back. I need to keep them down. Yet, I will say we've both had experiences of women helping women forward. And I'm just below that baby boomer, and you're at that young end of the baby boomer. So our generation is really about the same. So what made our experiences different? What did we see?
For myself, Ivy, I can say that my period of being in the upper echelons of corporate oil and gas, I refer to that period as my years of being kicked through the fences. 99% of the time by women. What helped me was this juxtaposition of these women in the business world who did not appreciate my presence there and wanted to make it as uncomfortable as possible so that I would leave. Juxtapose these wonderful women who were plucking me out of obscurity and saying, come on, Lesley, come with me. Let me teach you some things. And so I found my solace and my strength and my courage from these women who were outside of my business world. And I found the ability to take it in there and basically survive and thrive in spite of the hostility. That was my experience. What was yours, Ivy?
It's interesting. when I graduated college, I was in an employment situation that was led by men, and it didn't work out so well for me. And then one of the high-level managers said, my wife is a banker, and she has a client who is looking for an executive assistant, and you should apply for that job. And I said, oh, no, that isn't the career path I want. No, that's not right for me. He's like, just go on the interview. And I met this woman who ran a massive company who was looking for an EA. And she's like, come work for me. And from that position forward, it took me into another position of working for two sisters who ran a very, very large company. And I was their right hand. And it shifted. It completely shifted. And I remember growing up and, as an adult, my mother always saying, she goes, you are the image of my grandmother, a woman who's a business leader who just gets, fill in the blank, ladies and gentlemen, who gets blank done, right? Who gets a lot of stuff done.
Right.
And I always think it is what we choose to see. So there's negative and positive out there at all times. We can have the ability to track how we want, attract how we show up. So if we show up 100% positive, believing there are people who are going to help us, leaders who are going to have an impact, leaders who will, help us move forward, they're presented to us because we believe, and our beliefs turns into thoughts.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So going back to some of the nuggets you've learned that you've taken forward to build the business you have today, because you have done so much, Lesley.
I've traveled around. I've been there.
You said you have a background in oil and gas, and then you went on to build from there. This current, you went on to do another business, build a business, sell a business.
I did.
And then build this current business.
I built 3 businesses. I sold 2 and crashed one. And the one I crashed was the one I learned the most from.
Isn't it always true?
It's really important when we're crashing, it's a free fall and we're scared. Oh, it's terrifying to crash. But what's important is to take that minute right after and say, okay, I crashed, I burned. And this is something I learned from a brilliant man who mentored me in gas and oil. I had made a crucial error, cost the company a lot of money. And I knew I was fired. I just knew I was fired. So the next day I go in, and I went in early. I knew he always went in early. So I went in early. I thought, I'll just get fired. I'll be able to leave. I won't have to do the walk of shame.
Yeah, nobody will see me. Let's get this over with.
No walk of shame. Anyway, it ended up, he said, I walked in, he took one look at me and said, I don't think there's anything I could say that would make you feel worse than you've already made yourself feel. Now sit down. Tell me, I want you to go through it, and I want you to tell me, where was that pivotal moment? Where was that moment when you could have made a different choice and you either jumped too fast or you were nervous about making the other choice? Find that moment. And so we talked it through, and he said, if you will always do that when you make a mistake or when you crash a business, you will learn the most from the experience. So that's one of my great nuggets that I carry forward as I'm doing everything I'm doing.
It's interesting you share that, because when I was running my printing company for those many, many, many years, I had a policy. We're all going to make mistakes. It's human nature. We are not perfect. To put the stress on ourselves to live a perfect life, who needs that? There's better things to do with our energy.
Right.
And I said, so we're all going to make mistakes. And I say this at team meetings. We have team meetings every week. And I said, we're all going to make mistakes. What will keep you employed here is for those of you who own them and look for the support and course correcting them to learn from it. And I never in my 30 years of owning a company ever let somebody go for making a mistake. I have let people go when you've tried to bury it, hide it. That causes more upheaval.
Right. Right.
So that it's so true. We are going to make mistakes, and for those of us who show up with such a huge heart and caring, we can't. We're not going to be harder on nobody can be harder on ourselves than we are on ourselves.
Never. It's not possible. It is not possible in this or any parallel universe.
So in your company today and in writing this book, what has surprised you in getting this out and getting your messaging out? I mean, we've had an interesting few years as women leaders. As any leader, we've had an interesting few years. We are still navigating and looking at shifts and change in the way business is done moving forward. A strong belief, change is not always fun, and it's often needed.
Yes, yes. What has surprised me is the volume of women I have met who are ready for a change. They are craving a change. Some of them are desperate for a change, and they don't know how to make it. They don't know where to go. They don't know where to start. And that's okay. We don't have to know everything when we're starting. All we have to do is figure out, this is not working. These are the parts I'm going to take with me because these were great. These are what I learned. And then we will continue and we will find a path. And being able to speak with these women and help some of them walk through their internal data to find out where it is they want to go next is incredibly fulfilling. And particularly those who are leaving rather prominent positions and taking their professional equity.
You know what? I love that phrase. I love that phrase, professional equity. Can you define that before we go forward? Can you define that for us?
Absolutely. These are women who are in C-suite positions. They have worked very hard to achieve those positions. They have expansive networks of influence, but they've hit a wall where they have not for quite some time and will not go forward. But they understand what they have gathered. They understand the power of their influence and the extent of their reach. And so that's their equity basket. That's their professional equity basket. And they're picking that up, leaving, they're going out and founding women-founded, women-run either companies or organizations or foundations. And it is inspiring to be able to interact and work with and support those women in these actions.
I love that. So before we close, what are some things you could share with our audience of how to continue to honor not the people, the moments that impact ourselves as human beings, and how we can take that forward to like you have to others? Because I that's what I'm most impressed about. Oh, I'm impressed about a lot of things. But one of the things, let's go spade to spade here. One of the things that touched me very much was your honoring the ancestry to bring it forward and to raise. And, when we got to talking before we ever recorded today and we started sharing things and looking, and it got me thinking. And that's what I loved about it. It got me thinking about the people who made an impact on my career. From childhood to the people I worked for, in so many levels. So how do we stay present and learn and then honor?
I have two little stories, if I may, that I share with women often because I'm a storyteller. One of
the things I love about you.
It's more fun to tell a story and people they get it more easily. I get stories. So one of the stories that I tell women is the story of our ancestors. And I remind women how long it took us to get the vote. I remind women that it was the 1970s before we as women could get a credit card or purchase a car without a man's signature. And I remind women of how far we've come, because it can be discouraging out there, Ivy. It can be really discouraging. I get that. And so I remind women of how far our ancestors came, how hard they fought to give us what we have now, which is less than what we deserve. We can own that it's less than what we deserve. But if we look at what they went up against to give us this much, that's empowering to me. And I find that when I talk to women from that perspective, they find it empowering. The other thing I like to share with women is we don't hold ourselves as a collective. There are those of us who stand a little stronger in our shoes, let's say, but as a collective, women don't claim their value and they don't step up and bring their best to the table because they don't honor it as being good enough. So I invite them to stop comparing against everyone else and start to look at themselves and consider this. Look at an African Sahara. You will find that the zebras graze around the giraffes. They've got their heads down, they're not paying any attention. They don't have to, they just wait until they hear the giraffes look up or start to rustle, and then they pay attention. Then they know it's time to move. This is how so many people operate in the world. Heads down, not taking any responsibility for themselves, just grazing along and waiting for those few giraffes to stick their head up and say, oh, we're going this way. I like to invite women to be a giraffe in a field of zebras. You don't have to be the tallest giraffe in the field right out of the gate, but stretch. Be a giraffe in a field of zebras.
I love that. Be a giraffe in a field of zebras. Be aware, pay attention.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful, beautiful things. Lesley, can you share with our listeners today how they could learn more? Because you are just chock full of nuggets.
The easiest way to learn more is to go to my website, lesliemichaels.com. Now, I'm going to tell all of your listeners that since I have a British mom, it's Lesley Michaels instead of the traditional American spelling. But I am in continual revamping of that website. I'm always bringing new information. I'm always bringing new insights and new video and new voices. And of course, they can find me on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook as well. So thank you for that opportunity to share that with your listeners, Ivy.
And listeners, for those of you who are like, wait, how is that spelling? Just check the show notes below. And there will be a link directly to Lesley's site, and reach out and say hello. Let her know what the most impactful thing of today is. And please take a moment and think about what that was for you. What was that most impactful moment? What was your takeaway, your aha from showing up? Put it in the show notes. And most importantly, put down what action you're going to take for yourself based on learning. That's where the implementation and the results sits, on the actions we take. Thank you for joining us today on Her Success Story. See you next week with more wonderful guests and great content.